This is Melbourne. Hello, I'm Tom Paine, and welcome to Shire Network News, the podcast that stands up for Western values because, let's face it, most Western governments don't seem to be up to the job anymore. We're the podcast that doesn't ask the question, who are we to say our system is any better? Largely because if you take a quick glance at which countries anyone with half a brain and an ounce of gumption are trying to get into at the moment, the answer would seem to be fairly obvious. Only an intellectual could be so foolish as to not recognise the blindingly obvious truth that the Western Enlightenment political, cultural and, yes, I'll say it, religious values have made us the envy of the world. Some would say we should apologise for our existence, but I'm sorry, they'll have to speak up. I can't hear them over the sound of how awesome we are. We like to bring you a fortnightly dose of chicken soup for the Western soul, a few cheap laughs, a serious interview, some telling satirical points from our contributors, and we like to generally point and laugh at our enemies, foreign and domestic. Coming up this week, we have our regular feature interview. It's with American writer Bruce Bawer, who left the United States for what he thought would be the more tolerant and enlightened atmosphere of Europe. As a gay man, he thought he'd find Europe perhaps more comfortable. Yeah, reality came knocking, and this time it carried a knife. He's been trying to wake Europe up about the danger it's in ever since, without what we in the business call any real success. Now, Bruce Bawer is not the kind of guy you're probably expecting. He's not some sort of armour-plated, Bible-quoting, flag-waving, button-down conservative Republican. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Bruce Bawer is, among other things, gay. He's lived in the Netherlands and is currently based in Norway with his partner. When he left the United States for what he thought might be a more socially tolerant atmosphere in Europe, he got a hell of a shock when he discovered Islamic extremism on the march, and European authorities bending over backwards to not notice this fact.
I immediately sensed something was wrong because I had just come off the experience of investigating and writing in depth about American fundamentalism. And so my senses told me there was something here that was not good. And the first thing I did was I ran to the library and I bought a couple of books. I took out a couple of books about Islam in Europe. I could only find a couple. And they were books that painted the whole thing as just a wonderful, positive thing, the basic thesis being that Islam is bringing to secular Europe a religiosity, a spiritual dimension that it has lost. As ill-informed as I still was at that point, I could tell I was reading things that were propaganda and that didn't jibe with what I had seen and experienced. And so I started reading about Islam. I started finding what I could about Islam, and the more I found out about Islam, which is stuff I should have known a long time ago, the more I learned, the more uncomfortable I became.
Was this because of your gayness, or was it because of your Western orientation?
Everything. I believe in freedom. I believe in separation of church and state. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of religion. I believe in equality of men and women. All of this stuff was being violated by these subcultures within what was supposed to be the most liberal country on earth. It just didn't add up. It was a joke. And nobody was talking about it. I would look in the newspapers every day in these Dutch cafes. I'd look in the British papers and the French papers and the Dutch papers and the Spanish papers. Nothing. It was as if this whole side of life in Europe was not to be talked about and written about.
Well, not in public. Were people talking about this in private, though?
It's funny. I was new there, and at first I didn't know people well enough that they would talk to me about it. After a while, after I'd been in Europe a while, yes, you discovered that people were talking about this a great deal in private. But they felt as if they were doing something wrong when they did so. They had been so guilt-tripped by their media, by their politicians, that they felt that even to say simple facts based on the testimony of their own eyes and ears was to do something wrong, was to express some kind of prejudice.
Was there any particular incident or incidents which really sort of made this gel for you?
It certainly was a defining moment when my partner and I were walking in Amsterdam one evening, in the very center of Amsterdam, in fact in the very center of the gayest part of Amsterdam, and a group of young Muslim guys came up. One of them came over to us and pulled a knife on us and told us to give him money. This is the sort of thing that, I lived in New York for 40 years and had never been mugged. This is my first mugging. And it would not be my last, and it would certainly not be my partner's last. He said, worse luck with this than I've had. And it's happened there, and it's happened here in Norway, where we live now.
When this guy came up and pulled a knife on you, you demanded money. Was this just an ordinary street mugging, or was there something deeper behind it?
Well, first of all, I need to say that I did not notice the knife. My partner noticed the knife, but he was holding it so low and so close to me that I didn't see it. And so I just told him to hit the road. And he was young, and it seemed as if it was some kind of initiation rite into the gang, because he seemed younger and smaller than the others. And so he just fled. But the other ones were standing at a distance. They looked considerably less scarable than he did. Let's put it that way. And this is the sort of thing that at the time nobody was talking about. We're talking now about, let's see, when would that have been? 1998. Over the years since then, this sort of thing has been happening with increasing frequency in Amsterdam, especially. And even the gay rights organizations there, which are the most politically correct groups you can imagine on this planet, have admitted that this is a problem and that Amsterdam has totally changed its character, especially when it comes to gay people feeling safe.
Well, here you are. You're an American, a gay man living in Europe. It's not living up to your expectations. This big thing is happening in front of your eyes. People are almost deliberately not noticing it. What then makes you write these two now very confronting books? I mean, While Europe Slept, How Radical Islam is Destroying the West from Within, and Surrender, Accepting Islam, Surrendering Freedom. These are very confronting, hard-assed, armour-plated, grim titles. What made you decide to start, raising a hue and cry about this issue?
Because I'm a writer, and this is why I became a writer. And I see things that I think are wrong. And if I can't say the truth, then what's the point of being a writer? I might as well go do something else and make some real money. Nobody else, I can't say nobody else. There are other people who have written about this sort of thing before. But when I sat down to write While Europe Slept, there really wasn't anything that I'd run across that really addressed all this stuff in the way I felt it should be addressed. And that's what it means to be a writer for me. I mean, I needed to get it out of my system. I needed to. This is something I saw. I looked around me and said, something needs to be done. And the only thing I know how to do is I know how to sit down and write. And this is my contribution. And if I can help other people to realize it's okay to talk about these things, we have to talk about these things. It's vital. We can't let ourselves be cowed by the politically correct socialist governments and media in Europe into keeping our mouths shut about things that we all know are true. That's the path to self-destruction.
But what was the reaction to this? I mean, first of all, from other gay people to this? Because, as you said, the gay community in Europe tends to be very politically correct. How did they respond to you coming out with this sort of stuff?
Well, I hardly hear anything from the gay, whatever you want to call them, gay establishment, gay activist leadership, that kind of nonsense. I hardly hear anything from people like that. They, as far as they're concerned, I suppose these books I've written don't even exist. They don't want to deal with it. Gay people are the canary in the coal mine in all this, but they've been so brainwashed by multiculturalism. They've been brainwashed into thinking, well, they're constantly told how horrible the Christian right is. But when I was doing book tours in the States and being interviewed on radio shows and debating with or taking phone calls from very extreme Christian right people, I never felt worried that they were going to try to have me killed. In fact, they were civil. They argued very, very angrily against me, but they were ultimately civil, and I did not feel threatened by them.